Welcome to Conversations for Change. We've got a really exciting episode today with my dear friend Annette, who is also a well-versed pattern maker and designer based in Brisbane, Australia, who's had years of experience. Welcome, Annette. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Fiona. Hi.
Hi. So you've had such a long history in fashion. How did it start? Let's start from the beginning of your journey.
Oh, goodness. I've always played with clothes, even from when I was a little child. I can't remember how old. My mother taught me to, as soon as I was big enough to sit on a chair at her old Singer, which was a knee control, I remember sewing dolls' clothes on the machine, like pushing the knee controller with my hand and stirring the fabric with one hand. So I've always been interested, always cut pictures out of magazines of clothes, and always played with paper patterns, commercial paper patterns as a teenager. We did, the only real pattern making that I did was at high school, and back in the day. We did one, I think it was a half year component of sewing, and the rest was cooking. And we actually did some pattern drafting. So that was, to me, was very exciting to create something from the paper pattern. So I guess that opened my eyes a little bit to what could be done. I don't remember doing much pattern drafting on my own, but I know my mum always had the Enid Gilchrist books. She always made her own patterns in that respect. So she always did her own sewing, sewed everything for us, three little girls in the same dress with different colours. And
That's
so
so
it was
cute.
always around me. Yeah.
I can imagine a mini Annette in the matching dresses. Yeah,
Yes.
that's so cute. So if for everyone who doesn't know exactly the details around pattern making and how it works, could you say break it down really simplistically? What is pattern making in its basic form?
Okay. We use patterns to make clothing the same sort of way that an architect or a builder would use an architect's drawing, a blueprint. It's a plan because we've got three-dimensional bodies, which are effectively kind of a cylinder with extra cylinders added on, and we have to create a 3D garment. So we sort of start with body measurements, but we have to take it down to the two-dimensional level to create a pattern that then we can cut and sew, and it becomes a three-dimensional garment. So it's and there's a few different ways to do that, but it's essentially a way of reproducing a garment on scale, I suppose, using a plan, basically a plan. The same way that an architect's drawing can be used to create a house, or a building, which is a three-dimensional thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good way of explaining it because it can be quite technical. So as a fashion designer going into pattern making, so if you go in the reverse side and you design first and then pattern make, it's a lot more technical than actually drawing out the design. What's the most challenging part of making?
The most challenging part of making a pattern, I suppose, is because it usually does come in industry. It comes from a designer, or in bespoke clothing, it comes from a photograph or another garment that a customer has. It's actually replicating that image to satisfy what they're trying to create, I guess, what they're trying to achieve. So as a pattern maker, you have to look at the image or the garment and decide what's the best way to create that another garment that looks like that, which is, it's quite challenging actually, because you sometimes have to actually get into the designer's head a bit and imagine what they're trying to achieve, as well as the image on top of the image. But yeah, essentially there's three ways you can do it. If they have a garment, and this happens a lot in industry, you can actually either take the garment apart or fold it precisely and kind of trace it to make your pattern. Obviously, then you have to go back to pattern making fundamentals to make sure it is all going to work together, because you can trace multiple pieces of a garment, but they don't always fit. The way that we draft a pattern from scratch, we would start with basic measurements, and usually we start with, say, a skirt, a really basic 2D thing, and you would start with the hip measurement. So you would just measure the hip, and then you trace that onto what we call a block, I suppose. So you start with a rectangle, and then you reduce it down from the hip measurements to fit at the waist. So you'd add darts and shapes at the waist and make it fuller at the bottom. But the other way that we often work in industry particularly is we might have what we call a block of a skirt, which we know fits really well, and it fits. It could, or in a private bespoke garment, it can be a garment that already fits on the customer, and we know that that's a perfect shape for them. So it's got enough movement at the waist, enough at the hips, etc. And then we can draw design lines onto that, and then make a new pattern that might have a yoke or pleats, and the variations on that. And the advantage for that is it's kind of a starting point that you know the fit's there. You don't have to go to making a sample up to check the fit.
Yeah, and that's the most difficult part, is the fit, isn't it? Is to make sure, and that's why we make samples first from the pattern to make sure it fits, and then we adjust the pattern after. Is that right?
I find that's what we're missing, yes, a lot now. That's what you pay for in a high-end garment. You pay for that extra sampling to make sure the fit's right. Because the purpose of a pattern is to pretty much achieve the fit. There is another way to do that, and you can do that by draping. That's how garments were created. Ancient garments, Greek and Roman garments, were basically pieces of fabric that were just pinned, draped, and fitted around the body. But with our garments now, there's so much more with fit. We use a lot of stretch fabrics because we want them to move with us. So fit's crucial. It's a big thing that I see that we've lost with fast fashion, particularly because it's often let's do the drawing, let's copy the garment, let's get it out there quickly. So the sampling's not done to check the fit, and that's why there's so many garments out there that don't fit very well.
No, and no one's a standard size anymore. So it's because we've evolved so much. We eat so many different things, and our lifestyles are so different. So we've got to cater to that as well with each individual. What would you say is the most exciting part of making a pattern for a new designer?
Seeing that pattern come to life, I suppose, because it's a bit of a concept until it's actually cut in fabric. And then when it's put together and it actually works, it's always a little triumph. It's like, oh, wow, I created that. I was able to interpret that to make that happen. Yeah.
And then, I remember when I first learned how to make a block, and I was like, oh, is this really how you do it? And then when you create the block and make the block into a pattern to manipulate the designs with darts and yokes and everything, that just, it blows your mind, because it's such a long journey to get there. But once you practice it, it becomes like second nature. But when you can do that for someone and bring their idea to life, it's immediately life-changing.
It is, and I love that word, manipulating, because that's what it is. It's about manipulating shapes and fabrics and
My favorite part is manipulating the darts to create different shapes. Because there's just so
I know you love darts.
Yeah, I love darts.
Yeah. Well, darts are a huge way of making something fit onto a shape, because human bodies are so many different shapes and sizes. It's very fascinating.
It is. So for people who are very basic in their knowledge of pattern making, there is two types of pattern making, isn't there? So, or is there more than that? Because there's draping, and then there's the cardboard pattern making. And then you've got digital as well, but are those the two main methods that started off in the early days?
Pretty much, yes. It
Mm.
was either draping, and then then drafting, where you start with the actual measurements, and yes, you convert that rectangle or square into a shape, I suppose, by adding darts and armholes. And well, before, in early pattern making, actually, we didn't actually have the shaped armholes. Like if you look at historic pattern making, the sleeves didn't have a head to them. They were more of just a rectangle or a shaped rectangle, and the armholes were sort of extended a little bit on that variation of making a doll's dress by just cutting a couple of holes in a piece of fabric. And the Japanese sort of did a variation on that too, where they truly were no waste garments. They used the whole of the piece of fabric, and a kimono is a fabulous example of that, by splitting it and sewing it and creating those big draped sleeves. With the extended shoulders. There's a few different ways of creating garments, but yes, creating patterns, pretty much it is the working from a block or from a drafting from a square or rectangle.
Yeah.
The draping's really great if you're creating a style that's very draped, or you're working with a new fabric and you're not sure how it's going to be able to be manipulated. That's a big part of why we sample, because you can cut the same pattern in two different fabrics and it can act quite differently. And that's without it taking into account cutting things on the bias and, playing with fabrics in a vastly different way.
Yeah.
Like that. So draping's good if you do want to do ruching, or you want to have a really draped style, particularly in fine silks and fabrics that have a lot of what we call drape, where they like to fall beautifully.
Because that's where I started off with draping, and then I remember a friend made a kimono in the early days, and I modeled it for her, but I just remember it being so large and so all-consuming. It was like every bit of the fabric was like all over you, and just remember, don't fall over, just you can walk in this direction. And it was beautiful, and just the intricate detail of the fabric as well. So are most kimonos embroidery, or are they now print?
Look, I think they're both. I think they can be both. Yeah, or either one or the other. Yes.
Yeah.
They will use different fabrics as well. There'll be the bands on the ends of the sleeves, etc. Kimonos are an enormous work of art, because there's a particular art and skill to tying. I can't think of the name of it, but the sash. There's a real ritual in a lot of that dressing. A little bit like there used to be a ritual to dressing in Victorian times and early European times. There was so many layers and so much of an art to putting each one on and sculpting the body with corsets and things like that.
And as your career has evolved in the fashion world, what are you really excited about working on right now? What's a project that you're working on that really gets you up in the morning?
Oh, wow, there's so many, because there's so much talk here on the ground in Australia about bringing the industry back. I remember when I first worked in the industry in the late 1970s, we had a huge booming industry. We were making clothes, we were making shoes, we were making everything. So I've seen it pretty much all go offshore, pretty much all of it go offshore. So I'm one of the few left on standing that remember what it was like when we had.
Was it heartbreaking for you to watch everything go offshore?
Oh, very, very. We've lost so many skills, and yes, just even being able to get fabrics in the last 20 years, we would hear from year to year that a particular fabric wholesaler had gone, a mill had gone, a weaver had gone. It was very sad. and we were still trying to keep some sort of an industry going and trying to compete, which was really difficult as far as pricing. Yeah, and we would get people wanting to manufacture here onshore, but struggling to do so. So yeah, kind of having to join the host of people going offshore to manufacture. And that was fraught with problems as well. It wasn't just so simple as sending a pattern. You know, there were language issues, there were issues of container loads of garments being sent back from China, other countries, that were the right garment but the wrong fit because the pattern hadn't made it there in time and they'd copied a sample garment that was sent. Yeah, all sorts of issues like that. So it's really exciting for me to see. There have been some companies that kept manufacturing onshore, which is so heartening, but we're getting a lot more talk about and people trying to action manufacturing here, which is fraught with issues as well now because we've lost some skills. We've lost the factories where most people, people were often trained, not formally trained, but they learned a lot of skills. I learned so much about sewing different fabrics just in sample rooms, pattern making from other pattern makers in factories. It really is where you hone your skills and develop your craft. Yeah.
No, that's so interesting because we have lost a lot of expertise, a lot of skill sets, a lot of it's that emotional connection to clothing that happens when it is made locally and when you can meet the designer or when you can have that intricate connection to the design journey. How would you say that we can make our way back to a more local manufacturing industry?
I feel like I just have to get up every morning and keep working on the projects that I'm working on for the new designers. I have some young designers and some older designers, and I just encourage them, give them as much encouragement and information and education as I can, because to a lot of them, they are new to the industry. They might have come from elsewhere, other industries. So it's wonderful to actually watch them having those light bulb moments of, oh my goodness, that's why that pattern that I tried to make myself didn't work. I'm going to go back and tackle the next one. Yeah, and being able to educate people, I guess, and pass on that knowledge that I was lucky enough to gain from others.
In your opinion, why is it better to manufacture onshore than offshore?
It's incredibly helpful particularly for new labels, because a lot of offshore manufacturing you have to do on scale. And if you're a new designer, you're testing your market, you want to develop your range. You want to build, you might want to start small with capsule ranges, and you want to sort of develop those garments into newer styles. And to do that, you really have to do that onshore, because you'll find factories that can do small runs. If you're really lucky, you might find a solo machinist that can do your sampling and do your small manufacturing for you. And that means you can keep a really tight rein on it. You can be in control of what's happening. You can ramp up the styles that are selling. You can cut back on the ones that aren't. You can alter the fit even from one range to another, because you can work with your pattern maker and the feedback from your customers. It's the way it was always done here. We had some companies here in Australia that were, had the whole thing. They worked from the design through the manufacturing, albeit that they might farm out their manufacturing to a local factory, but then they had their own retail stores. So they had the whole thing, which we kind of do. We're kind of doing it a little bit with online selling now, but it's wonderful if you can be, you're on hand to fix any problems instantly. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a much quicker turnaround, isn't it? You don't have to do so much back and forth. We're sending samples back and forth. You're using less air miles, so it's more sustainable.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're paying a living wage by just paying an Australian wage to local supported machinists and seamstresses and pattern makers and designers. So there's just so many benefits in my eyes, but I can see that, yeah, from your point of view, there is so much more as well in the scope of things. Is there anything else that we could be doing as I suppose as consumers of fashion, what can we be thinking about to create a more sustainable life for ourselves? Where can we start?
I guess be mindful, but that then covers what I'm going to say next. I'm a great advocate of natural fibers because I have a huge issue with microplastics, and every time we buy synthetics, yes, it's not a secret, it's out there.
No.
And I just noticed one of our local stores in Brisbane is actually having a competition at the moment. I don't know when it cuts off, but go to the fabric store because they're you can win one of 5 special bags to wash your clothing in to capture those synthetic
cool.
microfibers.
All right, I didn't know that. So that's the fabric store. Is that the one in the Valley?
In the Valley, Wandoo Street.
Yeah,
Yes,
I love
yes.
that store.
So it's
like
just as simple.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's all dead stock. Yeah.
They take dead stock. Yes,
Yeah.
that's another thing. So yes, support a designer that uses dead stock, recycled fabrics, upcycling. But the other things that you can do is learn to sew, learn to create your own garments, and you'll realize what effort it takes to create a garment.
Then your value. Yeah.
Absolutely, you will value that machinist who sat behind a machine and sweated away making
but the
that
piece as well. You value the piece as well. If it's not something that's bulk made and just run through a machine, then you can see the difference. I always, when I was younger, because my grandmother was a seamstress, we'd always look at quality and how like seams was sewn. So I always looked at seams, and people were like, "Why do you always look at seams?" I'm like, "Because I just look at how it's sewn, and then you know whether it's a good quality garment or not."
That's why I don't mind doing alterations for clients, because I get to unpick their garments and see how they are made.
Yeah.
All of that technology is changing quite rapidly, and that's the wonderful thing. Other wonderful thing about my job is I never stop learning. Styles change, techniques change, technology and garments change. So I would say if you don't want to learn to sew, and I know we're all time poor nowadays, and that's a big reason why people struggle with creating their own garments, but there are dressmakers out there, and encourage new sewers to do dressmaking and alterations for you. Develop a relationship with someone who can do that for you, and ask them to alter your garments and be fair about paying them what their time's worth, and have bespoke garments made, because you'll love them because they are unique. I still have garments that when I was 17 and, doing my final year at high school, and screen printing the fabric and then sewing the garment and making it fit me. It's a work of art. Each garment becomes a work of art.
Yeah, it definitely does.
We all have to wear clothes, and if we can enjoy them, how wonderful is that?
I know. And a lot of people, like I met someone in the shops the other day at the grocery store, and told her what I do in sustainable fashion, and she was like, I'm not really into fashion. I was like, yes, you are. You're wearing clothes. You're into fashion. Everyone has a style. You might not think it's a good style. You might not like your own style, but it comes to like everyone is into fashion. It's like my friend Mariel says, if you are, you're buying bags, like tote bags or something for your business, or you're buying anything that's made out of textiles or fabric, you're in fashion, you're in textiles. You're funding the textile industry. So we all need to be mindful whether we think we're in it or not. And I think that's like really important to say that, you know, you might not have your own style yet, but you can form it through learning how to sew. Or even if you don't sew yourself, you can just have a look at what it takes to get there, just so you have that that knowledge, that appreciation piece of the craft.
Absolutely. Yes, most definitely. You can go to a stylist, you can have your colors done to know what colors.
Yeah.
Make your clothes or help your life be joyful by wearing something that you love. And it makes me sad when I hear a lot of my customers, and I guess I see individuals who find it hard to buy things off the rack, where they do go shopping and they can't find something. So I'm very mindful that there are people who slip through the cracks as far as fit, as far as maybe disability, and garments being functional. There's a lot to our industry that people don't really think about. They think,
No.
oh, just get dressed in the morning. It's quite simple. But even not making a choice is making a choice. So just to
Exactly.
be a little bit more mindful, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And knowing your sizing as well, like knowing what fits you, what kind of fit you want. Do you want a loose fit? Do you want a tight fit? Do you want slim fit? What fit dictates your style as well, because then that's something you gravitate towards.
Yes, definitely learning about what looks good on your body and what works on your body. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? So
Yeah.
if you were kind of new to the sustainable space, what would be 3 key things that you could apply today to become a more conscious person? So with regards to lifestyle or fashion, what would you recommend that we start with 3 things to become more sustainable?
My first thing is, go for if you have a choice, go for a natural fiber. When you're buying either garments or fabric to make something for yourself, and if you're going to the trouble of buying a garment, even, but particularly if you're going to make a garment, look after it. Learn how to take care of the fabric, the fibers in that garment, and care for them.
I
And
love that,
think
because so
about,
many people don't know how to wash linen or how to
they don't.
dry it without it
No.
freezing and things like that. So it's just simple steps that we have
And particularly in our climate, I was just going to say, Fiona, yes, our UV rays in Brisbane are so severe. I have clients who hang all their linen inside, or in the shade, which is not a bad thing. But then the third thing would be is think when you're, or consider, it's the being mindful, I guess, is when you're looking at making or buying a garment, which is more frequent, I guess, is how can I use this garment to fit into what I have in my wardrobe, and use it more than once? How can I make this an investment rather than I need something to wear Saturday night or to that wedding or whatever, that particular event? Is how can I change this garment to create an outfit that's going to be an investment garment, I guess. And buy something that's quality. It might cost more, but in the end, there was a fabulous book out when I was studying in the mid 1970s called Cheap Chick, and it was about how to be wise with your money. And it was just simple things like, in summer, just buy everything in white because it will all go together. And for winter, just buy everything in black. And I know that's quite boring, but
I love
it worked.
Monochrome
On a budget.
yeah,
totally. And you can mix and match, and that doesn't work on everybody's with their colouring. But the other thing that was in that book that I've always remembered was, it's about how many times you wear something. You might pay $100 for a dress and you wear it once, it's cost you $100 per wear. You might pay $300 for another dress, and you might wear it 300 times. That's $1 per wear.
Wow.
So
I didn't really think about it like that.
About the math.
Expand the value, and every time you wear it, if you wear it 300 times, it's $1 per wear. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's that's such a
and
simple
or
reason.
pass it on to someone. Yeah, or pass it on to someone who can
Yeah.
wear it. It's the old hand-me-down thing. Yeah. Don't,
Yeah.
please don't put it into landfill or
Yeah.
just leave it to go offshore where it's going to be
Mm.
in someone else's.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to recap, buy natural fibers or try and find natural fibers.
Yes.
So that could be your linens, your cottons. What else is a natural fiber would you recommend?
Silk and
Silk,
wool.
wool.
Yeah. Anything that
So the new tencel
comes from
fabric,
an
quite good.
animal.
Mm.
Yeah, anything that comes from an animal or a plant that, and
Mm.
particularly from plants that aren't treated with caustic substances, because there are some out there, modal and rayon and sometimes bamboo, that are
Yeah,
given
there's
a bit
a
of
lot
a
of conspiracy
greenwash.
around bamboo at the moment. So
It's about how it
yeah.
needs to be treated, yes,
Mm.
because some of those chemicals just go into waterways in poorer countries.
Yeah.
Yeah, things that can pretty much picked off a bush and spun or treated, fairly easily, like linen. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and hemp's another one that I think is
Good.
treated
Yeah,
fairly
hemp's a really popular
easily.
one. A lot of people like hemp. And look after it. So look after it, find out how to wash it, how to take care of it, how to hang it as well. Because you find
Yes,
also, even when you have like those metal hangers for pants as well, you can create indents in fabric, especially if it's like, if you do have something bamboo or tencel, it does affect the wear of the fabric. So
yes, definitely.
how can
And if
I,
you have wool,
sorry, go on.
sorry. Oh, I was just going to say, and if you have wool, make sure you store it with an insect repellent, even just a cake of soap or something to keep the moths away,
Ah,
to stop
yeah,
the
that's
moths.
true. We do
Yeah,
have a big moth problem
yeah,
in Brisbane, don't we?
we do.
Yeah, every time I see a moth,
Yes.
I'm gonna have to chase it out the door. So not getting to my sample.
Well,
Cannot
don't
touch
don't
it.
don't
Yeah.
kill all moths. It's only a
No,
particular
just chase it
type.
out the door. Just yeah. So also you've got the mothballs as well that you can have, can't you? That you can,
Yes.
yeah, they're good ones. So how can I wear this more often to increase the value of the item? So if it's $300 and you wear it 300 times, it's $1 per wear. That's amazing. I love that. And what about if you can upcycle it as well to
Oh,
the
absolutely.
value? Yeah,
Yes,
to bring
upcycle or
interest.
alter it if it's about
Yeah,
the fit. See if you can alter it. There's oftentimes many things you can do.
yeah,
Yeah, and if it's on the at the end of its life, and you really love it, and you can't get another one, talk to a pattern maker
yeah,
and make another one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And
Once you've
that's
got your
what we
pattern
do at
again.
our conversation circles. We say bring a piece that you love wearing the most and you want it remade in a better fabric, because we do the
Oh, yes.
so that's like been working, and it's amazing because then you actually get to see what people really want to wear instead of trying to say, hey, here's a design, make it work for you, if that makes
Oh,
sense.
I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, you're welcome to start a conversation with me or Annette about this and see if we can make you something to fit with a natural fiber and or upcycle something that's your favorite piece. So buy well and good quality as well as is that was your last point, wasn't it? Your third point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Think
Yeah.
about the maths of how many times will I wear it.
Mm.
It might be more expensive, but it's an investment.
Yes,
Mm.
definitely. I have to agree. And where can people find you if they'd like to contact you and get pattern making or designing services? Or just
Um,
really?
you can Google me. I don't have a website at present, but I do have an Etsy page. Just for Annette McDowell. Yes.
All right. I'll put your links and your contact details in the show notes so everyone can contact you if they so please. But yeah, thank you so much for being here, Annette. I know I've got so much out of this conversation, I always do with you, but I wanted to make sure that bringing it live we can really help people on their sustainable journey and just become more conscious every day.
Totally. Thank you very much, Fiona. I always learn lots from you too. So thank you again.
You're welcome.